thing you need to know about salmon is that they're anadromous fish. What the word anadromous means is that they spend part of their life in freshwater, part of their life in saltwater. Those are two really different ecosystems. So the fish go through a lot of changes in their life. They all start off in freshwater. That's where they're born as eggs, where they're all fertilized. That's where they grow up as juveniles. At a certain size, depending on the species, they head out to saltwater to seek out more food. While they're out there, they transform into the adults. Keep in mind, they're heavily predated upon this entire time. A lot of the juveniles get eaten by birds and bears, whatever wants to munch on them. Even out at sea, a lot of things like salmon, including us, so they're fishing a lot as well. But at the end of a salmon life, they come back to freshwater to have their own baby. They now have to adapt back to the freshwater ecosystem. Their body goes through a pretty traumatic change. That's when they go from looking silver to naturally out there, looking like these green, drabby colors. Some of them turn bright red, some of them get a really big hump on their back. That's all to adapt back to the freshwater ecosystem and make themselves really sexy and appealing to the opposite sex. Also, when they come back to freshwater, they don't have as much food, so they stop eating. When they come back, all they want to do is eat food. So by the time that they do, they have instant weeks, their bodies will change into different colors, and they're rotting away to death. So that's the end of a salmon life. They're going to die anyways. Usually it takes about a couple weeks after they spawn to fully die. So the fish here, we've already gone through the quota that we need to spawn. We've taken as many as we can possibly take. The rest of them we're going to kill because we'd rather them go to some use rather than just rotting away in our river system and attracting bears and all those other kind of vermits that eat them. So these guys will get donated to the Raptor Center, forced to the bear, go to become dog food. They'll go to some use. At least this way it's not just rotting away in our raceways, smelling like the town. Okay? So, up here Brian's pulled out a few examples of our fish. So get up close and look at them.
We got a bonus of those too.
What's that?
We got a king salmon.
Wow.
So do you guys know the 5 types of salmon that we have here? Not all of you? Okay, so there's 5 species that we get. Typically, we don't see king salmon in our hatchery. We used to do all 5, which is probably why we have a stray. So the king salmon is the biggest one that we get. They're also called Chinook salmon. The kind of least tasty dog food salmon is the chum salmon, which is the one right here. We kind of go by a hand acronym to remember all 5. So it rhymes with that would be your chum salmon. Poke yourself in the eye, that would be sockeye salmon, which are also called red salmon because they're bright red in color. Obviously none of these are sockeye salmon. Biggest finger is the biggest fish, that's your king salmon, also called Chinooks. You wear your silver on your ring finger, so that would be your silver salmon. We also call them coho salmon. They also get bright red, but they don't spawn till later in the year, so they haven't started running yet. And then finally on your pinky, that's your pink salmon. They're also called humpies because as you can tell on this male, they get a nice little hump on their back. Sometimes it's quite more exaggerated than that. This kind of sometimes comes all the way up here and around. So this is a male chum salmon, female, male pink salmon, female. So at our hatchery we get 3 of the 5 types. We get chum, pink, and coho salmon. And sometimes we get a random king or sockeye from the days when we used to do all 5. Yeah.
Which one is the most tastiest one?
Kings. Kings are the most sought after ones. Yeah. So I'll give you a little rundown of what happens in our hatchery process. Like I said, these fish spawn in freshwater. In the wild, they're not super successful with fertilizing all the eggs that a female can have. One individual female has between 1,500 and 3,000 eggs, depending on the species. And they only fertilize about 20% of those in the wild because they don't actually mate. There's no penetration. They just throw the gametes together in the water and they hope that they fertilize. So the female builds a nest, dumps her eggs in the nest, the male swims up next to it and sprays sperm on top. Not super effective way of fertilizing thousands of eggs. So we want to ensure that more of them fertilize from the get-go. So we intercept these fish right before they lay their eggs. We hand spawn them. We ensure that they fertilize, we ensure the juveniles survive, and then we release them out to sea to go ensure that there's more surviving salmon making it out to saltwater. That's really our main goal. Hatcheries are a fisheries enhancement program. So because salmon was overfished around the 40s and 50s, we had to come up with a way to ensure that more salmon were making it out to sea, and the numbers were still as abundant as we could make them. So what we do here, this is obviously where we collect our fish. On a day when we would be actively spawning the fish, which sadly is not today, sorry, you just get to see the dead ones. What we're gonna do is we're gonna scoop up the fish by the net full.